and I'm going to admit everyone into the room, and I'm going to close the waiting room.
Happening. Thank you.
Escribile ahora.
I don't think we both want to be here.
Welcome, everyone. Bruchim Habayim. Getting a little feedback. Let me figure out how to do that. I think Harvey is here as well. Bruchim Habayim, Boker Tov. We're very excited to welcome you to this morning's brunch program. I hope you've made yourself some wonderful French toast. I'm going to invite you to mute so we can begin this morning's program. And I'm going to be spotlighting our speakers in just a moment. I'm Rabbi David Lerner here at Temple Emunah, and we're very excited to have Mohammed Dawarsha and Amal Al-Ajouj, who are zooming in. To have so many speakers. We're going to need to just do a little bit more muting. Give me 1 second. Give me a second to go unmuted. Okay, I think we've got ourselves muted. Close the chat. Okay. All right. Let's try welcoming everyone again. Bruchim Habayim. Good morning. Boker Tov. Assalamu alaikum. Welcome, everyone. This is a very special morning here at Temple Emunah, although I think I'm the only one sitting here at Temple Emunah in actuality. But that's okay. That's part of the fun here in the pandemic. We are very excited to partner with our friends at the New Israel Fund and to partner with all of our friends at the Temple Emunah Sisterhood, led by Janet Goldberg, and to partner with our friends at the Temple Emunah Israel Committee to bring us an amazing program about building a shared society in Israel. And I'm very excited for that. I'm going to turn it over. I thought Harvey Lowell, our Israel Committee chair, is here.
I am here, Rabbi.
You are here. Excellent.
Yes, I am.
I just need to figure out how to spotlight you. I'm going to spotlight you. Here you are. You're outside.
Okay. Well, I stay outside as much as possible.
Excellent. So I'm going to turn it over to Harvey to say a word of welcome, and then we'll continue the program. Please, Harvey, b'vakasha.
Toda rabah. Ahalan wa sahalan, bruchim habayim. Welcome. It's wonderful to see everyone here today for what will be a fascinating discussion on a truly shared society. How do you build one in Israel with people who really know and who are known for leading this effort? Mohammed Dawarsha and Dr. Amal Al-Ajouj. As the rabbi said, it's sponsored by the Sisterhood, without which very little would happen at Temple Emunah, and by the Israel Committee, of which I am the chair, whose job is to create diverse programs and to act as a conduit for the diversity of opinion in the congregation. Much of what we do comes from grassroots initiative. We have Israel programming at all levels at Temple Emunah, the preschool, the religious school, adult education, learning groups, how to be an anti-racist, for example, special programs like last year's Peace of Mind, and in particular, Rabbi Lerner's synagogue trips to Israel, which are not only wildly attended and very much appreciated by the congregation, but which engage our congregants in all aspects, or as many as possible, of Israel's diverse culture, including meetings with Palestinian Arabs and Muslims, Christians, and is known for doing that. This reflects the diversity of opinion in our congregation, which comes really right, left, center, you name it. I think invigorates the discussion and helps people become active in the areas in which it makes sense. I want to say a word or two about the New Israel Fund, which has made this possible. True confessions, my daughter worked for the New Israel Fund in 2005 against sex trafficking in Israel. New Israel Fund was the only entity in Israel doing anything substantive about it at that time, and they have continued to strengthen the society by taking on good issues and by often making people uncomfortable, or at least less comfortable than they thought they were with how the society was running and how it went. So thanks to Stefan Esel-Green and Dalia Kruzner, who helped put this together and who also helped with our Yad B'Yad program last month, the Hand in Hand, the diverse integrated school system that visited us last year, and our discussion of the movie about it that took place last month. It is a great pleasure to be involved in this. We are honored to have our guests with us. And I want to thank all of you for participating in what is, I think, a crucial issue for obviously for Israel, but also for Jews in America. Back to you, Rabbi.
Thank you so much, Harvey. Yasher koach. And thank you for your leadership, both over the years as a past president of our community and your continued leadership in our Israel committee. I'm really proud of the work that we're able to do on so many levels, both cultural, political, and educational. If you walk into our synagogue on any day, you hear Hebrew. Of course, we don't walk into our synagogue so much physically, but we are filled with a community that really expresses the diversity and the love and the passion that is so much a part of what it means to be connected to Israel in all of its various facets. I'm going to invite Janet Goldberg, who has been leading Sisterhood with great skill, just to say a word. She did an amazing program on Space Torah last week, and just to invite her to say a word about the amazing work that Sisterhood's doing, including co-sponsoring this morning. Let me invite you to unmute. So I've got to just figure out how to do that. I've got a lot of buttons here. Let me invite you to unmute. There you go, Janet. You should accept the unmute.
Hi, good morning. On behalf of the Temple Sisterhood, I'd like to welcome you to today's program. Sisterhood's mission has actually been, for the past couple of years, about partnership. And we try to partner with whomever we can, whether it's, as Harvey mentioned, the Israel Committee, Adult Education, our school, and just to bring any challenging and unique programs to Temple Emunah. And with that, we know that this is a partnership agreement, and we welcome you to the program. We thank you for doing this for us, and I hope everyone really enjoys the conversation.
Thank you so much, Janet Todah, for your leadership, and we look forward to all the amazing programs that we're going to have throughout the year. One that I'm particularly excited for, just looking ahead, is going to be Hanukkah. We're going to have a Hanukkah dinner. Even if we're not in the building, it's going to be in everyone's house. It's going to light up the night, so look for that. And I know we'll have the Brotherhood Jumbo Chanukiah in partnership with Sisterhood. Now we're going to make the transition to our guest speakers, and I'm going to bring them onto our virtual, I don't know what we call this. It's not a virtual bima today, but it's a virtual stage of sorts. So I'm going to bring them on to bring them up here with me, and I'm very excited to welcome them. And I want to introduce them to our community, and just add how excited I am to have them here. This morning we have Mohammed Darwarsha, who is the Director of Planning, Equality, and Shared Society at Givat Chaviva Education Center, as well as a Shalom Hartman Institute faculty member. He Previous served as co-director of the Abraham Fund Initiatives and as elections campaign manager for the Democratic Arab Party and later the United Arab List. He is considered a leading expert on Jewish-Arab relations and has presented lectures and papers at the European Parliament, the NATO Defense College, the World Economic Forum, Club de Madrid, the United States Congress, the Herzliya Conference, Israel's Presidential Conference. He is the recipient of the Peacemakers Award from the Catholic Theological Union and the Peace and Security Award of the World Association of NGOs. He was a leadership fellow at the New Israel Fund. In 2008, he was elected as a city council member in his hometown of Iksal. In 2009, he served as a member of the National Committee, which drafted Israel's coexistence education policy. He holds a Bachelor of Arts from the Hebrew University in Jerusalem and a Master's of Arts in Public Administration from Hartford University. He lives in Iksal with his wife and 4 children. And I have to say, one of the great highlights of my life was it was 2 years ago. It was a July evening, and I was bringing a group of 15 Christian clergy with the JCRC, and we were in a restaurant in Haifa, and I happened to just be assigned by random luck to sit at his table for dinner. And we had the most marvelous conversation. And I truly felt that I was in the presence of someone who was one of the righteous people of this planet. And so I cannot tell you what a gift it is for me to bring him to our community this morning and to have him here. And I look forward to seeing him again in Israel. I hope to have many opportunities to bring groups to study with him, to share with him, and to continue to learn from him. In addition, we also have Amal Elsana Al-Hajouj, who is one of Israel's most highly regarded civic activists and one of the Bedouin community's most knowledgeable and dedicated leaders. Ms. Al-Hajouj is currently the executive director of ICANN McGill at McGill University School of Social Work. She is founder and former director of the Arab Jewish Center for Equality, Empowerment, and Cooperation, the Negev Institute for Strategic of Peace and Development, and was nominated as a Nobel Peace Prize laureate in 2005. She is considered one of the key shapers of public opinion regarding the status of the Arab minority and the status of women in Israel. She speaks frequently about her work promoting women's rights, Arab citizens' rights, and Jewish-Arab relations in Israel. And it is a great gift to have you here. We've only met a couple of times through Zoom, but I'm most blessed. Assalamu alaikum to you. And it is a great blessing to have you here along with everyone else who is here. And I'll just take this opportunity to thank all those who were helping behind the scenes from the New Israel Fund, Stefan Assel-Green and Dahlia Kruzner, and from our shul, Hannah Arwi, for putting all this together. I'm going to share the layout of the event. First, I'm going to offer some questions for Mohammed and Amal for about 30 minutes, and then we're going to leave plenty of time for questions. So you will have an opportunity to ask questions. You can write them in the chat, or you can just raise your hands using the raise hand button, which is on the bottom of your screen. There is a little button called reactions. So you can press your reactions and raise your hand after about half an hour. And Dahlia will be helping me monitoring the chat. And that is the program for this evening. For this morning, I guess in Israel, for Mohammed, it is evening. So for him, Erev Tov. For the rest of us, Boker Tov. So I will start with question 1. For first Mohammed and then for Amal, can you both tell us a little bit about your personal stories? We'd love to hear more about your background and how you came to this work. And that's what we'll start with Mohammed. I'm going to ask you first. I'll invite you to unmute and begin.
Thank you very much, Rabbi Lerner. It's a great honor and pleasure to share this stage with you, and especially with Amal, who is definitely one of the prides of our community. A wonderful opportunity to be together with her and you. And I'm also very grateful to Harvey and Stefan, Hannah, and everyone that was involved in setting this up, especially Dalia, with whom I've partnered on a number of projects in the past, with her role with us at Givat Haviva. And I'm also very, very happy that I'm seeing also among the faces here, I'm seeing my old friend Max Sampson from Milwaukee, who I assume is now in Mexico, but definitely one of my oldest friends. I think we met in 1985. And to see you still following this issue and this topic, it warms my heart, Max. Wonderful seeing you. And last but not least, my partner Doron Alosh, who manages the office of Givat Haviva in New York. Good to see you also, Doron. You asked me about what brought me, and Janet also. Excuse me, Janet. Thank you for your wonderful hospitality for this event. Rabbi, you asked me for what brought me to this work, and I would say the same reason that brought me in 1979 is still valid. In 1979, I was a high school kid that was invited for his first encounter with Jewish high school kids. And it was done at Givat Haviva Center, which is the center that I work for right now, and I manage its work in the field of shared society. That was the first time I met Jews. That was the first time I came to basically debate with them about who's right, and I was definite and sure that I'm right. By the way, I'm still definite and sure I'm right till today. And suddenly I discovered that it wasn't just a debate with Jews, it was a debate with human beings. And I was looking for a fight basically on narratives, on identities. And suddenly I discovered that we stepped in the same dormitories, and I wasn't stabbed at night, and they didn't poison my food. And these are experiences that basically challenged my stereotypes about Jews of my age at the time and what they would do to me if we go to the swimming pool. I was sure they're going to try to drown me if we play together. I came with all of those phobias, and none of those were materialized. Actually, the discussions were, yes, challenging, but also eye-opening. And that eye-opening situation forced me to continue seeking the similar experiences when I went to university. So I formed the first Jewish-Arab dialogue group at Hebrew University in 1981, which collapsed after the first meeting because we started fighting, and we started not physically, but screaming and swearing at each other. You did this to us, you did that. Then I started the second group. I thought, well, okay, I'll change the Jews in the group. So I brought the nicer Jews that also the discussion collapsed in the third meeting. Then I said, okay, I'll change the Arabs, which I did. And the discussion collapsed in the second meeting. So I went back to Givat Haviva and I said, well, how do you do it? How did you manage to hold a meeting that does not collapse after 1 or 2 or 3 meetings? And they said, okay, you need to learn conflict resolution. You need to go learn facilitation of cross-cultural dialogue groups. You can't just throw yourself in a discussion and within half an hour, you'll be debating about who did what to whom in the last cycle of war. And then you start backtracking until you go to 1948. Was it Nakba or was it independence? And was it Balfour Declaration? Or was it, who did Abraham want to sacrifice? Was it Isaac or Ishmael? And we continue to fight identities, and even that issue, we still don't agree on it till today. At the passage of how many years? Probably 4,000 years or so. And so I started learning also how to become a facilitator. And with time, I decided to professionalize myself in this field. Actually, I just completed 3 years ago another master's degree in conflict resolution from Haifa University. Again, as part of professionalizing myself. By the way, Stefan, that was the goal of my fellowship at the New Israel Fund in 1988, was to professionalize myself in this field. And I'm glad I did, because this topic is definitely, one, sensitive. Second, is important. And for me personally, it's personal. You know, my family has lived in this village. My kids are 28th generation in this village. We've been living here for close to 770 years or so. And I want to make sure that my kids continue to live here. And if we leave it to politics, they probably will not stay in Israel, because the state is saying to me and to my kids, I'm not your state, I'm the state of the Jews, which could ultimately lead to our expulsion. And so if we leave it to politics, it's leading us in that direction. And that's why I think we need to build stronger foundation of going down to the roots of human relations, which can build a different type of contract between Jewish and Arab citizens to save our future. So from my point of view, I'm very selfish coming into this work. I'm not doing it just out of love and peace approach, but out of the aspiration for survival, not necessarily physical survival, but at least remaining in my homeland. And the only way to remain in my homeland is not just to focus on the political debate and identity issue, but to focus on the human aspects and the economic aspects and the social aspects and the cultural aspects of how we build a shared society together.
I'm going to come back to that, Mohammed. That was really, really important to open up and get some of your background. And I want to come back to shared society in a moment, but I want to hear a little bit from Amal, and really the same question, asking you to share some of your background and how you came to this work.
Yeah. Well, good morning, everybody, and thank you very much for organizing this event. And I'm really most excited being with Mohammed. I remember, I feel very young still, but I remember these days of being a student at BGU, Ben Gurion University, in the and I had the opportunity to meet with Mohammed in different occasions. And coming from the Negev to the north, and usually the north would think they are the one who knows, and they should lead us, but Mohammed wasn't like this. So I never felt that feeling that I have to fight for my place. So Mohammed, I am really so happy to be with you. And yeah, so why would I care about shared society, and what brought me here? And actually, the personal is the political, and I think my personal life story is the defining mechanism for what I have been doing in my life. I was born and grew in an unrecognized village, Lagia, and lack of water, electricity, roads, and any basic services. I was born in a tent. And I was born as a fifth girl, and I didn't realize that I was a tragedy for my parents, because they wanted a boy, not a girl. My mother was crying. My father told her, stop crying. I guarantee you that I will never marry with a second wife, but you promised me to give her the name Amal. And they gave me the name Amal, hoping God will give them boys after me, and 5 boys were born after me. So I just was born in a place where there are a lot of expectations from me to do good in life. And then I discovered also, not being a girl in a patriarchal system that trying to really relocate herself in the center of the society, but also at the age of 5, it was my youngest aunt wedding, and I was so happy. And the second day after her wedding, she came back crying to my father, because my father was her eldest brother. And I didn't understand why, but they took down her one room that they built. It was a shack. It wasn't a room even for her as a new couple. And I came to my father and I say, why did they, I mean the Israeli forces, why they destroy her house? And my father, as any father, would just throw an answer to get rid of the nudnik kid like me. And he said, because we are Arabs. So just to throw that an answer as someone who is trying to find answers to many questions in her life, it was really dangerous. And so in the early age, I was juggling between these questions of being a girl in a patriarchal system and being an unwanted, and being a citizen in a state that I'm also unwanted. So how do you deal with these two rejections at the same time and deal with this intersectionality, being a woman in a patriarchal system and being a citizen in a state that treats you as a second-class citizen? My first encounter with Jewish people was at the mountains of Lagia. My first career was a shepherd. I used to wake up at 5:30 in the morning at the age of 5, take my 50 sheep, 3 cows and a donkey, go to the mountains of Lagia, come back in the afternoon. So Lagia and the mountains of Lagia used to be, and still, a place where all the soldiers will be trained in navigation. So I used to see all these soldiers coming up to the mountain of Lagia, and they would split into small groups and they will go to different places. And I would see what, like, their commander will explain something, will leave them and in the mountains. So one of the things that they used to do, they will use to hide a piece of paper, Nun Tzadik, Nukudat Siyun. So, and they will give them a map and they have to find that small piece of paper. I used to jump on that place. After the commander leaves, I take the small piece of paper, I hide it, and I see the other group coming to search, and I see them going back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, until they are very tired. They will go and come back to the same place, and then I would jump and say, hey, are you looking for this? This was 1986. And they say, yeah, please give it to me. And I will say, I will give it to you in one condition, if you give me loof. Loof was the meat that the soldiers used to eat, Harvey, right? You know, you remember that? And I used to be very hungry as a shepherd. So I used to jump and take the food, but they were nice, okay? They were nice. And then you look at the people who took down your aunt's shack, and you look at these soldiers who give you meat. Like, it was so confusing for someone like me. But really the define, and I became an activist in a very early age, but I was so extreme in a way that I was waiting for the land day to burn tires and throw them in the main roads. I didn't want to study Hebrew because this is the enemy's language. I grew up with all the the poem of Mahmoud Darwish and the songs of the poem of Samih Al-Qasim, and I was really thinking that's the way. Like, I'm a patriot, that's the way. And the defining moment in my life was when I came for my master's degree at McGill University in 1998. 1998, I came. This was my first time traveling abroad. It's a long story. And my supervisor gave me the address to go to do my field placement in an Italian women's shelter. And I went down the street of Sherbrooke, Stefan, you know where's Sherbrooke, to take the bus. And I start talking with the driver of the bus in English. And my English at that time was so basic. And he looked at me and he spoke in French. And I said, I'm sorry, I don't speak French. And he insisted that I will speak French. And I was so stressed out because this was my first time being in such a place with a cultural shock. And he was insisting, and I'm trying to convince him that I don't know French. And only that time I really discovered, I always thought that the only conflict exists in earth is the Arab-Israeli conflict. And I wasn't aware of the Francophone and Anglophone conflicts and any other conflict. But when I was really trying to convince the driver to listen to me and to give me the right directions, I heard in the back of the bus a voice of a young girl saying, Ima tikan khilit ha'af. And this was Hebrew. So all of a sudden, that language that back home is a language of my enemies that I didn't want to study became my language because it was familiar. It wasn't French, it wasn't English, it was the closest language at that moment. So I jumped at the woman and I looked at her and I said, oh, do you speak Hebrew? את מדברת עברית? And she said, yes. And then I said, I'm from Israel. And this was the first time I'm saying to someone, I'm from Israel. And she said, I said, this is what I need to do. And I need to go to that shelter. And she said, wait, this is not the right bus. She got off from the bus with her daughter, and they took me to the shelter, and she invited me for Erev Shabbat at her place. So in Montreal, this was the place where I was able to meet with Jewish people in their, normal life, not a soldier, not a police, not in a navigation, not when they are taking down the what they call illegal shack. So that moment really was a defining moment. I decided that when I come back to Israel, this is what I want to do. I didn't believe that only Jews in North America care about human rights and equality. They must be people who really care about our situation and their situation back home. And this is how I came to the conclusion to establish AJEEC, the Arab Jewish Center for Equality, Empowerment, and Cooperation.
Wow, that's quite a bus ride and quite a story. Can you both maybe follow it up? You both use the term shared society, and that's the title of this morning. Maybe each of you, if you could just take a minute to reflect on what exactly does that term mean to you, and maybe that will help us as we move forward through this program. Oops, I gotta unmute each of you. Hold on. Okay, let's get you.
Well, thank you for the question, Rabbi. I think that, first of all, I would like to pride myself and maybe take some credit for challenging the old term, which the term shared society came to substitute. The old term was coexistence. People were talking about Jewish-Arab coexistence. And I remember writing an article at the Jerusalem Post in October 2000, right after the Second Intifada started. And probably a week or 2 weeks after, 13 Arab citizens were killed. And it was, the article was called 300 Reasons to Come to Work Tomorrow. And basically it was the fact that I saw a group of Jewish and Arab kids at Givat Haviva meeting, encountering, despite the big rift and big debate and the mistrust that was created between the two communities after the October 2000 clashes with the police. But that also led me to not just to say, okay, keep the hope of coexistence alive, but also made me thinking. And because when I said reasons to come to work, it was because of having reasons not to come to work. And the reasons not to come to work was some sense of cynicism in the concept of coexistence, some sense of ineffectivity in the term coexistence. The concept of coexistence between Jews and Arabs was based, unfortunately, on what we call the social contact theory in social sciences. The social contact theory basically says, bring people together, create social interaction, eat hummus. In America, you call it mother and apple pie. Sing peace songs, and things will sort of ease themselves. We'll become friends, and we might even start singing Hora together. Or sometimes Am Yisrael Chai. Those kind of issues, maybe they are about culture sharing. Maybe they are about getting to know each other and create some kind of sympathy and empathy. But the problem with those encounters was that they end. And we have a syndrome which we call returning home syndrome. After those encounters, Jews go to their segregated, separate Jewish homes, and Arabs go to their separate, segregated Arab homes, where you also have inequality. Arab kids go to their poor neighborhoods, and the Jewish kids go to their privileged neighborhoods. And when you talk about big political issues, Jews claim all of the assets, such as the state, the flag, the national anthem, the priority, the jobs, the top positions of prime minister, civil service, police, anything. They have all the power, and Arab citizens have basically the lowest jobs of service-oriented jobs, such as construction, waiters, cleaning garbage, gardening, and so on. So during the encounter, which we call the coexistence encounter, we do experiment some kind of equality, but it's a temporary equality. When it ends, that equality returns. So I wrote another article a few months later. I have a tendency of writing something every few months. So I wrote another article, which I called it the horse and rider syndrome, describing, that was also in the year 2001, describing those coexistence programs as a horse and a rider coexistence programs, where you can go in a wonderful joint ride, where both sides can enjoy the same views, breathe the same air, sometimes drink from the same river, have a wonderful social interaction or physical interaction, and wonderful loyalty that can develop during this ride. But this ride also ends. While during the ride, there is that hierarchy structure. One is riding the other. Maybe both are enjoying it at that moment, but at the end of the ride, that hierarchy becomes stronger. One goes to the barn and eats hay, and one goes to the castle and eats a steak. And if you're French, it could be even a horse steak. And that means that the structure of coexistence between unequals has an expiration date. And I don't want to be the horse, and I don't want to be I don't want to be eating hay, and definitely don't want to be eating. And that basically challenged this whole theory of social contact. So we started developing what I would call the knee-jerk reaction. The knee-jerk reaction for this industry of coexistence was to initiate an alternative foundation for those encounters. So we said, okay, let's bring in the elephant to the room. Let's dialogue. So the word that substituted coexistence was dialogue. And dialogue is based on what we call the narrative debate theory. You talk about the problems. You allow the elephant into the room and you strip it. You start cutting it to pieces. And in a narrative debate, as I said, you know where you start, but you never know where you end. And we quickly in evaluation realized that with that kind of a narrative debate, you can actually do more damage than good. In best case scenario from a narrative debate theory, you can agree to disagree. As I said earlier, we continue to disagree. Who did Abraham want to sacrifice 4,000 years ago? And as such, we disagree also of what happened in 1948 and what happened in the year 2000 and what's happening even now with this government. We have disagreements on narratives and how we understand reality. So after we started seeing that this narrative debate creates some kind of a damage also, we said, well, the substitute needs to be, and research, a lot of research was put into this. Part of it was also through the good help of the New Israel Fund, with funding that came from the New Israel Fund. We discovered what we call the mutual interests theory. The formal name of that theory in conflict resolution, it's called the superordinate goal theory. Basically, where we focus on mutual interests. And with mutual interests, you realize that the term equality evolves, because we don't want just good relations, we want also equality. And we don't want to be the horses, we want to be, or the riders, we want to be either two horses pulling the same wagon, or two riders enjoying the ride. So when you talk about shared, the term equality forces itself to the surface. So when you combine these two words, equality and good relations, coexistence and equality, that's the new understanding of the term shared society. It's supposed to reflect these two values together, equality and good relations. So it's not just about good relations between Jews and Arabs. That doesn't interest me as a standalone. It interests me, and it's important as part of a formula. Now, the last sentence here, Rabbi, is that when you ask most Jews in Israel, what do you think about shared society that has those two values? Most Israeli Jews say yes, but they have a conditional relationship between these two values. They say good relations first, and this will lead to coexistence. I'm sorry, this will lead to equality. While if you ask most Arab citizens, they'll say equality first, and this will lead to coexistence and good relations. It's like looking at it from a different perspective, conditional relationship. I think I also wrote about that it shouldn't be like that. It should be actually two parallel tracks. That these are, yes, there's conditional relationship, but it's not one waiting for the other. It's one step in each direction in each track at two parallel tracks, because you need to build the vested interest of each community into this kind of a strategy of shared society.
Thank you so much, Mohammed. And thank you for explaining it and giving us some of the background. Amal, I was hoping you would help us shift gears and reflect on what do you think are the greatest accomplishments that you've think have been happening in working towards a shared society in recent years? And what are some of the most significant obstacles that you are facing today?
Well, I would say that I absolutely agree with Mohammed and everything he just said, and I think also the shifting paradigm that happened in 2001 also affected me as an activist. My departure point towards shared society came from the empowerment concept. For me, it was very important to empower the marginalized. If they don't have voice, they won't fight for equality and they won't care about cooperation, because people who have no food on the table, they don't care what's happening in Bir Saba, Beersheba, or in the Knesset. So my departure point was from equality from empowerment to equality and to building partnerships. And I didn't see them as steps that are following each other. In some ways, sometimes it would be a holistic approach. Other ways, it will be the empowerment as a condition, the equality as a condition. But I always worked with the three concepts at the same time as a holistic approach. So I would just give one example. I do want to add to what Mohammed said about the segregation, because we all grew up in our villages not knowing who are living 17 kilometers from our homes. And if you ask a kid from Herzliya Pituach when he traveled for his vacation in Eilat, he wouldn't ask himself what's going on, why these people are living without water, without electricity, and in these shacks. He wouldn't ask himself. It doesn't ring in his mind that this has something to do with democracy, has something to do with Israel, has something to do with government. So for me, it was very important that we will work with the Bedouin community of the Negev to empower them into understanding what is it about equality, why Ahmed doesn't have water in the unrecognized villages, and how to connect the local issues with the national policies, because people in marginalized communities usually tend to blame themselves for their own situation, victimize themselves, and they have difficulty connecting these issues with the national policy. So this was the approach, empowering the marginalized communities, but at the same time, who are the marginalized in the Naqab area, in the Negev? And when you look at Ofakim as a developing towns, and you look what's going on there, you understand that there is an issue here where all the Naqab people are treated as backyard of the state of Israel, Arabs and Jews. So how do you do this when you know that all the politicians will use us against each other and make us fight over limited resources? And instead of telling the one from Ofakim, listen, it's about policy that we need to change, they would say, oh, the Bedouins are taking over your land, the Bedouins are stealing your car, the Bedouins, and we will end up fighting over limited resources instead of pointing to the policy that both of us are victims of this policy. So the first program I started in 2002 is really with single mothers in both communities, in Ofakim and in Rahat. Single mothers in the Bedouin community, because of polygamy, and it's a long story, I don't have time to explain, but they are not recognized by Bituach Leumi, by the Social Security Institution. They would tell them, oh, but this is you still live with your husband, so there is no way we'll pay you any benefits as single mother, because this is your traditions, this is a polygamy. but there is a law that prevents polygamy. So at the same time, they are not enforcing the law, they're not implementing the law, and at the same time, they are not providing benefits to these women who are victims of these practices. So I took the two groups of the women and I said, what we want, and in the Jewish community, if you are a single mother and you want to buy a car or you want to apply to study at Sapir College, you will not get your benefits as a single mother, because guess what? You have money. If you're a single mother, you should stay poor and single and without any help. So I took the two groups and we went together to change this policy towards single mothers. And I told them from the beginning, we are not talking about Arab-Jewish relations. We are talking about the situation of single mothers in Israel, where we have to change this policy. And it was by nature, this conversation about why we are not talking, why we are not visiting each other, how come you have a mother in a family in Gaza and you are living in Rahat? Oh, but your family from Gaza, and what happened? So all of a sudden, the Nakba narrative came in, the Holocaust narrative came in. But it wasn't that we directed this, but we were there to facilitate and provide a safe space for the women to talk about these things. But really the main issue was to promote policies that change the single mother's conditions in Israel, both in the Jewish community and in the Arab community. So for me, it was very important that we create a common interest, that we both work towards changing it. And when people come towards a common interest, they will really be able to build the values around this. And guess what? Sometimes all this program, we tend to think that, oh, we need to agree in everything so we'll be able to work together. Who said that? I live with Anwar, my husband, now for 22 years. We hardly agree in 60%. And we still raised twins, amazing twins. So why we are pushing people to agree on everything? We agree in 60%. Let's focus on this 60%. And build the common projects in these 60%. And believe me, the similarities will be there to take care of the differences. And that's what I encountered when I was leading Ajik with all the programs. There is no program at Ajik that we called coexistence or dialogue. All the programs were doing based, and then the well-being will be like the other component of the program. So the Gap Year program for Arab and Jewish kids coming together to volunteer in the Jewish schools and in the Arab schools. And we decided it's not the situation where the Jewish kids coming from Herzliya saying, oh, we want to help the Bedouins in a very patronizing way. It will be the situation where Jewish kids and Bedouin kids coming together and saying, we want to volunteer in Shkhuna Dalet in Beersheva. We also want to volunteer in Khashem Zanni, the unrecognized village. And guess what? When Aisha and Noah are coming together to the same Shkhuna Dalet, with Aisha has her scarf and Noah there as a Jewish, and they are teaching in the same school, these kids who are experience this relationship will never think that, oh, Arabs are only the one who need help, and we will help them. Changing the paradigm. And when Noah is going to this unrecognized village and see what's going on, she also will question when she's going to vacation with her family to Eilat, she would tell them, listen, these people didn't choose, as the government tells you, they want to live in the unrecognized, they want to live in their shack. These people want water, want electricity. It's a policy that the government is not willing to change. And so when you see these things, and you see the change in this Gap Year program that we believe that will change the leadership in the future of Israel, and you will see a different leadership in Israel, that's another project. I just want to share the third project, which is the Hagar School. And the Hagar School grow up and started from my living room when my kids became 3.5 years old. And I said, okay, I have two options: to send Muad and Adan to Lagiya village. I was living at the city of Beersheva at that time. There was no schools, there is no Arab schools there, where 22% of the teachers in Lagiya are not qualified and the educational system is so low, or send them to the Jewish schools where they will never learn about heritage, culture, Nakba, language, nothing. And my kids will be cut off from their roots. And there is no way that you can grow up in a confident and a solid identity if you have no roots. So I invited Jewish couples, and I invited Arab Palestinian couples from Beersheva, and we sat together and we decided to establish Hajar. It's my mother name, by the way. and we established Hajar School to bring Jewish kids and Arab kids together. The school grew today to reach 280 kids studying together. It's elementary school. We have been trying together with Yad Biyad to make this as an alternative. So if you want to go to Jewish school, go. If you want to go to Arab school, go. But let parents choose the third option, which is the Arab Jewish schools.
Very nice. Is Hajar like Hagar?
Yes.
It's Hajar, Hagar. Very nice.
So my mother was the one that was kicked by Sarah, but that's okay.
We're trying to make it all come back together again.
Yeah.
Let's we'll do a couple of quick last questions, maybe with a little bit shorter answers so we can get to everyone else's questions. Mohammed, I'm interested, as you know, there are clearly challenges. When we were there in 2018, we were dealing with this very challenging law in front of the Knesset, which was changing things for Arab citizens of Israel, which was very hard. And we were talking about this, and you were speaking very personally about the pain. What is giving you hope for the future in the coming time, coming months, years? Where are the places that give you a sense of tikva, a sense of hope?
Well, this is a question that requires probably a whole semester to answer. I would start saying by, I see my kids and I see how they're evolving, and how despite everything, despite the nation state law, which does try to demean us, does try to humiliate us, does try to marginalize us, does discriminate against us. It became a constitutional law that the majority of Israeli Jews subscribe to it in a very, one, surprising, and second, as I said, humiliating. I would even dare say ugly way, that they look at us as secondary human beings, as secondary citizens. Despite all of that, today is the 18th of October. It's the beginning of the school year. My son is starting his MBA, Master's in Business Administration, caring less about all of these discriminatory policies. My daughter is starting her PhD in genetics at the Technion, caring less about what the state of Israel is doing to her. My other daughter is starting her first year as a dentist, again, caring less about everything. And my youngest daughter is starting her first year in pre-academic studies at Haifa University. So when I see this generation, it's a generation that can allow all of this rhetoric and even legislation of anti-democratic, anti-civic, anti-Arab legislation. They allow all of this to pass above their head and focus on capacity building and on building ourselves to, one, be capable, but at the same time, we're trying to find our way and our path inside the Israeli social economic arenas. So the political battle in the Knesset and in the media, and which probably is echoed in Boston all the time, it's there, but at the same time, real work is happening on the ground. And I will share maybe some data that might be shocking for some of you. So only 15 years ago, the percentage of Arab students in Israeli universities was about 3.5%. Today, it's 19%. 2/3 of them are female students. That's a social, academic, economic revolution. That's a capacity building. We're challenging ourselves, but we're also challenging the Israeli academic scene. We're forcing them to create space for us in the academic system by focusing on our brain power, on that muscle, instead of our physical power in the construction work. More and more kids and families are willing to sell their clothes in order to send their kids to school, realizing education is our true mobility, and the creation of a middle class in the Arab community is the way forward. And I will share another example. our percentage in civil service, in government civil service, 15 years ago was less than 3%. Today, it's 12%. In the police, it was less than 1%. Today, it's 11%. Our percentage of doctors in Israel is 23%. Our percentage of nurses is 31%. Our percentage of dentists is 35%. Our percentage of pharmacists is 55% of the pharmacists in Israel. So we're beginning to show force and capacity, and the Israeli Jewish medical industry, academic arenas are opening up mainly out of need. They need that medical capacity, which is doing wonders during these days of Corona. They need our intellectual capacity in the engineering schools to direct people more and more to high tech. We are 22% of the engineering students in Israel today. We're 30% of the students of the Technion, Israel's version of MIT.
Oh.
We're building that capacity so that we don't stay behind, but we are behind meanwhile, but we're knocking on the doors very, very hard with something on the table. We bring something on the table to Israeli Jewish society today, forcing them to create that kind of space. So if I want to be hopeful, is that trend in the Arab community that is building on capacity building, developing this kind of middle class, challenging the rules of the game of discrimination by creating this new engagement. The story, and I will end with this, when my daughter finished her undergraduate degree, she went to work for a company called Medinol. They create cardiovascular stents in the veins to prevent clogging of the veins. And she was the first Arab employee in this company of 758 Jewish employees, the first ever. And she was assigned to work in the R&D, in the research and development department. And all of the 11 people in that department, that's their elite unit, all of them are people ages 27 to 40. All of them make $8,000, $10,000 up. That's the upper middle class in Israel. All of them have scientific degrees, great jobs, great cars, great packages in the organization. And all of them define themselves as liberal Jews and as democratic Jews. But none of them, Rabbi, none of them was ever in an Arab home, and none of them has ever visited an Arab home. She worked there for 1 year, and then she went back to do her master's and now to PhD. In that 1 year, 8 of them invited her home, and 4 came to visit our home. And I asked those, I took the liberty to ask those that came to visit us, what took you so long? You're 40 years old. What took you so long? Why have you never visited an Arab home and you're telling me with your kids, their kids are 12 and 11 years old, you've never been to an Arab home? And their answer was very naive. We don't know any Arabs. It's like, come on. And their second answer would say, okay, we know the gardener, we know the construction workers that come, we know, and those are the only, and the waiter at Aroma branch in the neighborhood. And one of them challenged me, said, would you invite your waiter home? He said, you're more likely to invite someone who's a complete stranger that sits on the next table than to invite a waiter, because there is a social class difference between someone who's a waiter and someone who's being served. And that's a problem in Jewish-Arab relations, that the economic layers where 49% of Arab citizens sit below poverty line and only 12% of Israeli Jews are below poverty line, that's a population that cannot engage together except maybe in crime or in car theft and things like that. But the more we help in creation of an Arab middle class, which is similar in its capacity to the Jewish middle class, that's where we're able to create a new arena, actually New Israel. In New Israel, where not many Israelis interact together, but we're forcing a new DNA into those kind of places. And that's the DNA of skill, capacity, brain power. And the proof is what's happening in the hospitals today with the mixed teams of Jews and Arabs. Almost 30% of the staff that is fighting the COVID-19 today, 30% are Arab staff, and we're only 20% of the population.
It's great. Tada, shukran, gives me hope as well. Amal, same question. And while you're thinking of the answer, I want everyone to start thinking of their own questions, which you can start posting in the chat or start thinking in your head.
Yeah, I think I don't really want to add any to what Muhammad just said in terms of the I would leave the vision for my last to conclude with. I really prefer to hear questions from the audience, and then we'll answer.
Okay, great. So then let's unless you have some final last thoughts before we go to the questions from the audience, Mohammed, let's turn to the audience. The first question came from Phil Goff, which was, are these statistics about just Palestinian citizens of Israel, or does it include West Bank? This is just Palestinian citizens of Israel. Dahlia answered it in the chat. The West Bank and Gaza is a whole different story, which we're not tackling today. Which
They're
is
not considered neither citizens nor residents.
Right. They're in a whole different situation, which is a more complicated one. Today, we're dealing with the 20% of Israel's citizens who are Palestinian. That's today's topic. So let's have some questions. I'm going to try to see people. So raise your hand and or raise your hand in the chat or ask questions in the chat. I'm going to start with Marina and spotlight her and get her up on the Bima here. This isn't a Bima, I don't know what it is. And Marina, please, I'll invite you to unmute and ask your question.
Hi, thanks so much. This is really, really interesting. And I'm going to ask a question that I hope I'm not going to offend, but I'm very curious. And I get to ask you this because I ask this question to Jews all the time, but not to. So do you think it is really possible to have a democratic Jewish state? Any state, not Israel, like it is possible to, I'm from Argentina, and in Argentina, up to 10 years ago, the president had to be Catholic, right? So I was Jew, but you would ask the question, was it a true democratic state where a president needed to be Catholic, right? So I want to hear your honest answer. Do you think, do we need to give up one of the two? Or is it possible? And if so, how? Thanks.
Who wants to take it first? Amal, please.
Okay, so there is no one can hide that. Absolutely, there is a clear contradictions between being a Jewish state and being a democracy, especially when we see that most of the policies in Israel are driven by this definition. It's not by accident. If this was symbolic for Jewish people to say, we would feel more safe and secure if we call it a Jewish state, but then there is no policies driven from that, there is a place to live with that. But for me as a minority, it's very challenging to see how the state defined itself as a Jewish state. And based on that, all the legislation are really driven by that. And I would be left, and that's the reality, I would be left out of that. So there are many people who really want to decorate this saying, oh, but there is no contradictions. Like Jewish values and democracy are similar. Absolutely, Muslims can say that Muslim values are also democratic values. But when you prefer one group over the other based on their religion, this is racism. This is discrimination. This is a place where none of the free states or democracies would allow it. So, in a personal level, it's really very hard for me to live with this, and I always need to navigate. But when I talk about the right for Jewish people to have a state, yes, they have a right to have a state. But why on the expense of equality and true equality in Israel, where by being a Jewish state, I can't buy a land, I can't live where I want to live, I can't love someone that I fell in love with, my cousin, because he loved a woman from Bethlehem. They were not able to live in Lagia because she's a Palestinian and he is a Palestinian Israeli. In what place in earth you will be imposed to or to be directed to love someone, in what place in earth that they will prevent you from falling in love with someone? And that's a result, direct result from the laws that based and driven from the definition of Israel as a Jewish state.
If I may add just quickly, and again, I'm not going to do this question justice, Marina, but you can see a number of feeds, video feeds, and lectures I gave on this topic. Again, this is another semester. But I would like to say that Israel is not the only nation state. And it's not the only democratic state. And it's not the only state that faced this debate between the ethnic and the democratic nature. All of Europe has gone through this. That's a nation state. I spent all of 2016 in Europe, the whole year, visiting 23 different ethnic minorities that were recognized by the states as national minorities. So the concept of a nation state is legitimate. Jews have the right to have a Jewish state. But you have two things that you need to guarantee. One, if you define the rights for that ethnic group, you need to define the rights for other ethnic groups. First of all, regard them as an ethnic group. Israel does not see Arab citizens even as a group, forget ethnic. It sees them as a bunch of individuals. So if you want rights for the majority, you need to guarantee rights for the minority. Collective rights for the majority, it means collective rights for the minority. If you want to maintain the flag as a flag of the Jews, then don't expect that respect. It wouldn't be my flag. I will respect it because it's yours. So I probably stand with the flag when it's risen, but I will not see myself into that flag. So the burden of the proof that it is an inclusive flag is on the shoulders of the majority. They need to create space in that flag. They need to create space in that national anthem for me to be able to identify with it and not just respect it out of being polite. I respect it today out of being polite, not out of feeling that, I'm going to shed a tear for the Israeli national anthem, because it speaks about the Jewish soul and it's not my soul. I have nothing against Jewish souls. I love many Jewish souls in my surrounding, but I need to see myself. I need to tell my kids, this is your national anthem. Be quiet, listen to it, comprehend it, endorse it, feel it. It's not my feel. It's not trying even. The flag, the national anthem, the definition of the state are not trying to hug me and make me feel at home. Now, this is a debate that wasn't like this all the time. If you go back to Supreme Court Justice Theodore Orr in the State versus Qa'dan case in the year 2000, in March 2000, he talked about this. And he said that until that moment, until the year 2000, the two values of Jewish and democratic were equal values in the Israeli regime. But since 2009, since Prime Minister Netanyahu came to power, and actually all of the religious right in Israel, they started challenging this equality between these two values, between democracy and the Jewishness of the state, and started putting Jewishness above and on the expense of democracy. And the more you do that, it means the more discriminatory you are and the more racist you become. The nation state law that was passed in July 19th, 2018 is a racist law that doesn't deserve to be among the basic laws of the state of Israel, which are of democratic nature. It desecrates the democratic nature of the state of Israel. So you can't be racist at the same time and democratic. You need to choose one of these two things. Right now, in the legislation aspect, we're in the losing end of this battle. But there were times that the Supreme Court and the politicians cherished the democratic values of the state, at least as equal to those of the Jewish nature. Again, I do understand, because I support the creation of a Palestinian nation state in which also some Jews could become minority. And I want to respect that minority. It also means that I need to respect the rights of Jews to define the state as their nation state, but with two conditions: equality on the individual level, and collective rights for the Arab citizens, so that we're not stepped on in the process of the rights for the Jewish ethnic majority. And this has been done in many, many nation states. Israel did not invent the wheel, and it will not be inventing the wheel if it goes by equality values.
Thank you so much. I'm going to I go to a question from the chat. Invite some more questions. Please feel free to raise your hand and jump into the discussion. This is a question from Anita Feld. She understands that about 8 years ago, Haifa government was building an annex to Haifa University. Did that happen? Do you think it met the goal of allowing Arabs more education in the Haifa area? I don't know much about this, but maybe you do, maybe I'm not sure.
I don't know much about this either, but Haifa is considered to be among the best cities and city governments in the country. Haifa University has gone through a fantastic process in the last few years. I remember about 11 years ago, I went to the dean of the Haifa University, and I was challenging him why the university was adopting discriminatory policies. And he said, us, Haifa University, with 30% Arab student body, no way. And I said, come and see a few things. One, the only Arabic signs you have are in red, and they indicate what's not allowed. Do not use the elevator in case of fire. No entry, no smoking. And all the information signs of where's the dining room, where's the library, they were in Hebrew only. It took them less than 2 months to change all of the signs. Then I made a note about the fact that the bus stations to Arab towns and neighborhoods are separate than the bus stations to Jewish towns and neighborhoods, and they have no cover from the winter and from the sun. There's no water cooler like the Jewish stations. There's no bathrooms next to them. It's just a pole in the sun in some neglected part of the university. Again, when I said this to him in the office, he said, not in my watch. I've been a dean for 3 years. This doesn't happen. So I said to him, come with me, see for yourself. See your own campus. He said, I don't know how to hide myself from shame. And again, it took them less than 2 weeks to make the changes. Very often, what we have is what you call de facto discrimination and not de jure discrimination. Natural behavior of segregation and separate is never equal. So they try to separate the buses out of convenience so that the same bulk of buses go to the same place, but that convenience maybe was right for that moment when you were talking about the one group of students, not when you have 30% of your student body. And not when you start investing so much in the benefit of the main hall of waiting station, and you completely neglect what you created as a side support for Arab students. It ended up that in this de facto discrimination, what starts happening is a gap that goes and grows and grows and grows until it becomes actually a monster that it's hardly seen. Yes, it hurts Arab students. Not all of them dare to speak about it. I got a call about it, and that's why I went to go and visit it. I requested a meeting. It seems that some of them have already written to officials in the university. And when it comes from one student, two students, who cares? But when it came from people with a little bit more social, political, media weight, then they started dealing with it and corrected it. Yes. So yes, there's often good intentions, but that the de facto discrimination, I would say, is our biggest enemy, and more than the de jure discrimination. I'm more concerned about these types of problems than I'm concerned about the nation state law.
Interesting. Amal, any thoughts on this issue of discrimination that you see in the Bedouin community or in other places, and how it pops up in various ways?
Well, it's another whole lecture talking just about the Naqab and the Negev and the house demolition and the villages that are evacuated by the state, and the last apology that Bibi Netanyahu had just expressed after the death and the killing, actually, not the killing of Abu Al-Ga'an, blaming him for being a terrorist and killing him. And then after, just recently that they found out that it was all bullshit and the guy wasn't there to do anything, and they just killed him. So what we see in the Naqab area is not only the backyard of the state of Israel, but there we see a very aggressive policy practices towards the Bedouin community. I don't know if there is any place in earth that still with 82,000 people have no water and no electricity and no permission to build, even expand one room to accommodate your kids' needs. I don't know if there is any place that have still for 8,000 people, 0 high schools. And when the Supreme Court decided that schools in the unrecognized villages should be provided by electricity, the government was going around it by providing generators, pollution, total pollution, put it next to the school. And when they operate the generation, the noise is huge that the kids can't hear anything. So when we talk about the situation of the Bedouin community, it is not financial issue. Israel was able to settle more than 1 million immigrants in the 90s, Russian immigrants coming to the Negev. We are talking about 280,000 Bedouins, 82,000 among them are still living in the unrecognized villages. So it's a political issue. It has nothing to do with the financial situation of the state or with money. And if they think that the situation will be resolved by itself, it's a big mistake, because what we have been seeing in the Bedouin community, there is a whole trend of really being more, I would say, even extreme towards the right when it comes to the state policies. People just give you one way of looking at the identity formation in the Naqab area. My father, my grandmother would say, "Ana Palestinian." She never mentioned Israel. She said, "I'm a Palestinian." She passed away in 2007 at the age of 92. And my father would say, "I'm an Israeli." He would never mention the Palestinian aspect of his identity. He lived through the military regime. He was fed of fear. He wasn't able to talk about his own suffering. And the 1948, when he was 12 years old at the time. And it came the generation, like my generation, who's saying, "I am a Palestinian and I'm also an Israeli. And I want to promote my equal rights within the framework of the law, the Israeli law. But I have been doing this all these years, and we see absolutely, I'm not gonna take this away from the civil society movement in Israel and all the accomplishments that Muhammad just mentioned, that really was made precisely because the Arab community took the lead in it, and the civil society organization were there to lead also. It wasn't because the government all of a sudden woke up in the morning and said, "We want to change the policies and we want to make sure that we need to include all the Palestinian Israelis into one state that belong to all citizens." So now when you look at the young generation, either they say, "I don't care, I want to do my PhD at the Technion, I want to focus on my capacity building," or they would say, I don't see this state as my state. And you know what? I don't want to fight within the framework of the law. I want to fight outside of the law, and violence will be the issue that we will see. So that's what I see in the Naqab area, in the Negev, and I really think that what keep the Naqab still in a place that they are trying to promote within the framework of the law is these civil society organizations and the people who are aware of how really to lead the process of the advocacy and the community advocacy. But many, and you saw this in 2000 and 14 with the big demonstrations in Hura and the violence that was there. I really don't want to live until see the people who's leading the society are the people who really don't believe anymore in partnership or in a state that cares about its citizens.
Thank you. A last quick question, very short, because we want to wrap things up as we can. From Tony Steckler, has the Israeli Supreme Court considered this nation state law, and has it ruled on it one way or another? And then I want to always end on something good. The Jewish tradition says you always have to end on something positive. So I have to end on something positive. So that question, and then ending on something positive, please.
Okay, I'll start, Antonia. There are almost 52 appeals against the nation state law that were presented to the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court has chosen to delay. They already decided a few times to set a date for the start of the discussions about the nation state law, but they decided to delay it because of the political cycles of elections in Israel. They didn't want the discussions to seem to, or to appear to be affecting the discussions of the Knesset. So they still didn't even have the first session. Actually, my organization, Givat Haviva Center for Shared Society, we initiated the campaign. We call it the Children of the Place. If you go to our website, you can even get exposed to this campaign. We even translated some of the videos were about this. And just yesterday, we launched another segment of this campaign, trying to keep the issue alive in the public scene, trying to force at least segments of the government to talk about the nation state law. As I said, it's, I'm not satisfied by saying it's a disgrace for the democratic nature of the state. It needs to be taken out of the book of laws in Israel, and then we need to continue marching against it and talking against it and keeping the discourse about it live as much as we can. So we are doing this. So please do go visit our website if you want. Doron Alush, who's my colleague from New York, can also maybe send you the links if you want to those pages, or especially the ones that we have in English. But the Supreme Court, in another case in the year 2010, was faced with a similar law that was passed. It was called the Acceptance Committees Law, which grants almost 800 Jewish towns the right to form acceptance committees regarding who can buy, rent, sell properties on those towns. And they basically said the majority members of the Knesset have the right to pass such a law. There is no law against equality in Israel. There's no law supporting equality. There is no law against discrimination in Israel. So the balancing act that some people in Israeli center parties, such as Blue and White, they're talking about the passing of a law called the Equality Law, which is supposed to somehow neutralize the nation state law, where it will make the nation state law contradictory to the equality law. One, the equality law has not even been presented to the Knesset, let alone it didn't pass. And meanwhile, the use of the nation state law for discriminatory acts has been launched. Towns such as Afula, for example, decided to close their public parks in the weekends for the use of the Jewish residents of the town only, to prevent the Arab citizens from the surrounding villages to access those public parks. The Supreme Court there did intervene and ruled that this is discriminatory and illegal, that the city council cannot pass this law. But many sub-government agencies are trying to materialize and use that nation state law to break it to smaller pieces based on what we call the spirit of the law. And the spirit of the law is that discrimination against Arab citizens based on the Jewish nature of the state or the city or the public sphere that you want to control and maintain as Jewish, that spirit of the law is beginning to trickle down. The law is the foundation for a trickle down policy of constitutional discrimination, because the law is considered the basic law and has constitutional value. But to end in good news, I always like to end with good news. I'm a social entrepreneur in the field of shared society, and I've created a number of projects that when I started them, everyone said it's impossible. One of them is what we call the Cross-Sectors Teachers Program. I started in 2005 with introducing 6 Arab teachers to teach in Jewish schools. They were the first 6 Arab teachers to break the segregation in the educational system and to start teaching Jewish kids. We know now that their impact is dramatic. For 93% of those kids, this is the first time they meet an Arab. And for 63% of them, this interaction after a year shifts their perspective towards the positive. So we took this program and we progressed with this. Now it's also Jewish teachers that teach in Arab schools. And we've grown from 6 teachers in 2005 when I initiated this project to 1,268 teachers, 1,010 Jewish teachers, Arab teachers in Jewish schools, and 250 Jewish teachers in Arab schools. And they are doing wonders. They are touching 384,000 kids every single day. 384,000 kids, Jewish and Arab kids, have the other, a Jew or an Arab, changing their life, changing their perspective, challenging their view. The other is not just complete stranger or an enemy or distant person, but it's someone that is enriching me, someone that is interacting with me, someone with whom I can also create interdependency. I'm depending on that Arab teacher for the grade. I'm depending on that Jewish teacher for my grade. The parents are getting engaged, which is dramatic in this case, because the parents are legitimizing the image of the other as an authority in the life of their children. And that is a very unique space that didn't exist before. Now it's affecting almost 18% of the Israeli educational system.
Very nice, Mom. And a final word, Amal?
Well, I think I do really believe that everything just that was said by Muhammad in terms of what is it that's happening in the ground and all these numbers, we will see very soon a changing society. I have been never worried. I always optimistic because I believe in people, and I believe that we have a very strong civil society in Israel, Jews and Arabs working towards shared society. I see the changes happening. And when we see all this like racist legislation, it's also a reaction to a very radical way we are taking towards building shared society. There is a reaction to what we are doing. So I am not worried because I believe that civil society organizations are leading, and always the change happened in the grassroots level. It's always a bottom up. So if our grassroots organizations are strong, led by New Israel Fund and other organizations, I am always optimistic. And my vision is really to see my twins, Muad and Adan, walking in Tel Aviv in Dizengoff Street. No one is pointing towards them saying, give me your ID. They would walk as proud citizens of the state of Israel.
It's a great,
just one sentence.
Great vision.
Before
Stefan
says something, my colleague wrote, Dalia just wrote a website of Givat Haviva, but I also invite you to give donations to Givat Haviva through the New Israel Fund as an earmarked donation.
Well, it's a good transition to Stefan, who is our local here in Boston, Vice President of New Israel Fund. I'll turn it over to Stefan. Oops, I got to unmute him again. Sorry.
Great. Thank you so much. What a wonderful community to be a part of. We've really been honored to participate in these two conversations. Thank you, Amal, and thank you, Mohammed, and everyone at the Amuna community. It's really been just our honor. I'll just say very briefly that the New Israel Fund is really about building an inclusive democracy. And this morning was an example of our work trying to ensure that all Israelis, including its Palestinian citizens, feel represented, feel included, and don't feel invisible. And we are a partnership between Israelis and the diaspora. Our board of directors, our international board, is split right down the middle between Israelis and diaspora. And Amal just stepped off the board after serving 2 great terms with us. We're nonpartisan, but our moral compass is our mission. And that mission is from the Declaration of Independence, which talks about equality of all the inhabitants. And in this polarized world, we need to see more of that. We do our work through social change, not direct service. We provide grants to NGOs like Giva Haviva. We do coalition building of organizations and activists and try to come up with shared goals together. We advocate within the Knesset, and we mobilize the Israeli public. I'll just say 3 quick things to sum up our work. Our CEO recently repackaged our work for us, Daniel Sokach. And we sort of talk about supporting the systems of democracy within Israel, from protecting such civil rights as freedom of assembly, the right to protest, freedom of speech, ensuring separation of powers. So that's some of the work that we do. We also serve as the creative engine of thinking and helping to develop and refine what a coherent indigenous Israeli progressive narrative would be on issues as varied as social and economic justice, to religion and state, to shared society. And bringing to our third frame, we promote a shared future for all Israelis at all levels of society. In the past, the work was really trying to convince the Jewish Israeli public that its Arab citizens were not enemies within, were not the 5th column. And that evolved into trying to ensure equal funding and infrastructure support for Arab cities and towns. And there's been some great strides in that with a lot more work to do. And now we're pushing sort of a new level, trying to push the idea of shared leadership from municipalities all the way up to the coalition government, so that, as Mohammed said, we could see leadership right into the government of Israel that includes Palestinian Israeli citizens and their parties, which we have never seen really to this date. How can you get involved? Well, you can join upcoming events. We're going to send an email after this, but Israeli chef Michael Solomonov is doing an event this Wednesday night at 7 p.m. If you sign up, you'll see what ingredients you need to get, and you can participate in that cooking demonstration. But we're thrilled to have that superstar chef participate with us. We're not all about social policy, but sort of doing things to get there and to talk about that. And
he was with us on our last Israel trip. He showed up at breakfast at the hotel. We had a great time with him.
Excellent. I hope you ate well.
Very well.
Good. Dahlia just put into the chat how you can sign up for the Solomonov event. And I think, as we said last time, we have a film club every couple weeks where we pick the film, we tell you how to watch it, and then we get together on Tuesday afternoons at 3 p.m. with the director of that film and talk about it in small group discussion and then as a large group. And it's great to see so many Boston folks join that group. And Dahlia will put that into the chat as well. Lastly, on October 27th, we're having a more serious topic about police brutality towards protesters, which has been a real phenomenon over the last few months. One of the panelists will include Ethiopian Israeli leader Efrat Yerdai, who will talk about her experience as an Ethiopian Israeli leader around racism and police brutality and what is happening on the ground today. And then, as Mohammed said, we welcome your support. We welcome your financial support for the New Israel Fund and for our grantees like Giva Haviva, and we'll tell you how to do that in our follow-up message. So again, thanks so much. It's really been a thrill to be part of the Amuna community these last 2 times, and I'll turn it back to you, Rabbi Lerner.
I just want to say Toda Rabah, Shukran. This has been an amazing morning, and thank everyone for Zooming in. Thank you for your questions. Thank you for your participation. and thank you for your support. Hope you can all join the New Israel Fund, both in your participation and by being supporters. And we look forward to our continued partnership and look forward to seeing you in person. So that will be very exciting. So Boker Tov.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Laila Tov.
Laila Tov. Bye.